Before we hear this morning's gospel lesson, a point of personal privilege. This is the last Sunday that a beloved member of our congregation will be worshiping with us as she's moving north, as she has served in so many capacities here that I can't even begin to enumerate them, save to say that she served as vice moderator and moderator. I would invite you to join me in offering through our applause, our expression of thanks to Jennifer McLean. Who I realized I just embarrassed, but such is life, Jennifer. You will be missed. Our gospel reading this morning comes from the Gospel of John, and it happens during John's telling the story of the Last Supper. It happens, this particular passage, right after Judas has left to go and betray Jesus. Hear these words. When Judas had gone out, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and will glorify him at once. Little children, I am with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and as I said to the religious leaders, so now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." Please pray with me. Might words spoken and words heard and the spaces in between increase our willingness to love. Amen. On our recent trip to Israel, I had 2 or 3 people ask me about the fish symbol that seems to be so ubiquitous there. It is found in the tile work on many Christian churches and can be seen on T-shirts, mugs, and other tourist paraphernalia. What does it mean, I was asked. Maybe you've wondered the same thing. The symbol, which you've all seen, is really very simple. It looks like that. It can be drawn with a single stroke. It represents one who follows Jesus. It's an ancient symbol. Like the disciples Peter, Andrew, James, and John, those of us who follow Jesus are often spoken of as being fishermen or fisherwomen, hence the fish symbol. In times of persecution by the Romans, if a Christian was walking down the street and encountered somebody they didn't know and wanted to ascertain whether he or she was a Christian, they might take a stick and just casually doodle in the dirt, draw that symbol of a fish. And if the other person correspondingly drew the same symbol, then they would know that they were a Christian, and it was safe to speak about their faith without fear of being arrested. Today, the symbol shows up in advertisements and on the business cards of those who want to identify themselves as Christians to potential customers, and notoriously on the bumpers and back panels of many cars. So too, other such bumper stickers that proclaim one's faith, denominational symbols, catchphrases, and so on. Tim Schrenk, an Episcopalian priest, once wrote a piece reflecting on bumper stickers. For the record, he writes, I've never put an Episcopal Church bumper sticker on my car, let alone a fish, not because I'm embarrassed to be an Episcopalian or a Christian, but because with the way I drive, I don't want my cutting someone off in traffic to be someone's lone impression of my denomination or my faith. I learned to drive in Brooklyn, after all. Probably the most famous of the Christian bumper stickers is the one that reads, "Honk if you love Jesus." Once again, this is presumably a way that Christians can identify each other in crowded spaces. Just honk. I'm not sure how it works in Midtown Manhattan during rush hour, where everybody seems to be honking regardless of religious affiliation. I couldn't help but chuckle when I recently saw a takeoff of that well-known bumper sticker. Honk if you love Jesus, it reads. Text while driving if you want to meet him soon. I suppose there's nothing wrong with wanting to publicly identify yourself as a follower of Jesus in such a manner. But Jesus himself had a different idea about Christian identity, and it is well captured in our reading from the Gospel of John. It takes place at the Last Supper. But unlike the other three gospel accounts of that meal, John doesn't emphasize the food and drink that they consume. There is no talk in John about bread and wine being symbolic of body and blood. Rather, John begins his narrative of that meal by recounting how Jesus washed the feet of his disciples as each one of them arrived. Public foot washing, of course, is outside the experience, I suspect, of most, if not all of us here. But in that time and place, when folks went barefoot or wore open sandals, it was considered to be an essential act of hospitality. Washing a guest's feet was an important way of making him or her feel welcome in your home. And every good host saw that it was done. But it was washing feet. Dirty, dusty, smelly, stinky feet. It was a task, therefore, that wasn't usually performed by the host, him or herself, but rather by the lowest ranking slave or servant in the household. So for Jesus, the leader, the teacher, the rabbi of this group, to take on this task was a dramatic role reversal. Peter even objects. Lord, he says, are you going to wash my feet? It's not right. It's not proper. I won't let you do it. It'd be debasing for you. It'll undercut your authority. But Jesus insists, and finally, Peter assents. It is in light of their just having had experienced this time of the Master washing their feet that Jesus offers up what has been called the new commandment. Love one another, he says, just as I have loved you. You also should love one another. Of course, as one commentator notes, it isn't really a new commandment, at least not in one sense. In the Torah, Leviticus 19:18 to be exactly, we read, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus is offering up a fundamental Jewish law here when he says love one another. But what makes it new is what follows. For Jesus says, love one another just as I have loved you. Symbolically demonstrated in the foot washings I've just now performed. That's how I want you to love one another. In other words, we are to love and serve one another without regard of rank or status or privilege or place in society. And then, almost as an afterthought, he adds a few words about public identification. He doesn't say, honk if you love me. He doesn't say, put a fish symbol on the back of your donkey. No, he says, by this everyone will know that you're my disciples, if you love one another. That's how they'll know you're one of my followers. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean that we need to run around washing each other's feet, though some denominations have made foot washing a ritual of the church on par with Holy Communion. But it does mean we are called to serve each other in true humility. If you've ever washed another person's feet, you know what it is to talk about true humility. It takes you to the floor. It takes you to your knees. It takes you to a position that may be uncomfortable. And yet for the person whose feet you're washing, or for that matter, spouses, the persons whose feet you're massaging, it may make all the difference in the world. That's how we are to love one another, with that kind of humility, that kind of willingness to serve each other, even if it means holding one another's stinky, smelly feet. We don't do it to get brownie points, though I know many a husband who does foot massages for brownie points. We don't do it to build up a reservoir of goodwill. We don't do it to give us bragging rights. No, we are to love one another, serve one another in such a way because it is the right thing to do. I hate using the word Christian as an adjective, but I will this time. It is the Christian thing to do. It is in and through such actions that we truly demonstrate, truly show we are followers of Jesus. Such actions define us. How will others know we are Christians? By the gold crosses we wear around our necks? By the fish symbols we put on the back of our cars? By the way we honk in response to a bumper sticker? No, they will know we are Christians, as the old spiritual puts it, by our love. Many centuries after the time of Jesus, the church would lose sight of that fundamental truth, and medieval versions of fish symbols and bumper stickers would become identifiers of those who were counted as true followers of Jesus. But then one man stepped forward to remind people of their true identity. He was born into a family of great means and named John at birth. At 14, he entered the family textile business, but he was far more interested at that time in spending money on wine, women, and song than on making it. And his father considered him a huge failure. When fighting broke out in a neighboring state, he got caught up in what he saw as the glory of war. He went out and he bought for himself a full suit of armor and headed off into battle only to be captured and thrown into prison by the enemy. There he moldered for a period of time in a rat-ridden cell, usually left with little to eat, dirty, bedraggled, homesick. It was there that he came to see the folly of his ways and experienced a new sense of call to serve the poor, which he did when he was released. He sold all that he had to aid his impoverished neighbors, and he sold some of his father's goods as well, which only deepened the rift between the two of them. He had always been one who greatly feared lepers. But one day when he was out riding, he encountered a leprous beggar. At first, he rode right past him, as he had always done. But then something inside him prompted him to turn around. And he did. And he went back, and he got off his horse, and he wrapped his arms around that man and gave him a kiss, and then left him with his cloak. Later at prayer in San Damian's church, a hollowed-out shell of a building, he heard a voice as if from the crucifix above the altar. "Look at my house. It is in great disrepair. Restore it to me." While he did literally repair the building in which he was praying, he came to understand those words as a much broader call. Help the church return to its roots. Help the church once again be identified not by wealth and status in society, but rather by love of neighbor. His behavior galled the local bishop, and in a dramatic confrontation when he was called to task, John tore off all his clothes and symbolically walked away in protest, walked away from his old life completely. In time, others would come to follow his simple way of serving the poor. This man of wealth and station gave it all up to serve others, even as Jesus had. While born John, he came to be known as Francesco, or Francis of Assisi. And his spiritual ancestors to this very day take vows of poverty, serving the poor all around the world. Your path will no doubt be different from that of St. Francis. Certainly mine has been. But as followers of Jesus, as imitators of Christ, we are called to do more than simply honk our horns and wear cross-shaped jewelry. We are called to love one another. And to do that, we must be willing to humbly serve one another in whatever capacity presents itself to us. Not looking for fame or fortune or even recognition. For it is in humble service that those around us will come to know that we are truly followers of Jesus. By our love, that's how they'll know. Our love for each other and our love for the marginalized, the poor, and each of our neighbors, regardless of rank or wealth or station in life. Love one another, even as I have loved you.